that my name is Gal and I'm Jewish, and we have had enough of Jew hatred.
Gal Gadot has decided that she has had enough, and Rachel Zegler's dirty laundry is finally out for the world to see. The live-action Snow White is out, but nobody's talking about the storybook magic or the evil queen's cheekbones. What everyone is really talking about is the drama behind the scenes, and oh boy, it's giving full soap opera energy. Gal Gadot was having some intense issues with her co-star, but you can never guess what actually caused it. All off, believe it or not, it was a single Instagram post. On March 21st, 2025, Rachel dropped a heartfelt tribute post on her Instagram to celebrate the release of Snow White. It was emotional, reflective, and full of behind-the-scenes hugs, smiles, and thank yous to all the lovely humans she worked with. She even called the film life-changing and said she grew so much over those 4 long years on set. That's enough time to go from fresh-faced newcomer to red carpet regular, but as people were glad to be included in her sweet nostalgia, fans started noticing one very obvious thing missing. Where on earth was Gal Gadot? Very grateful.
Very grateful. We're great. We're exhausted.
Yeah, you are.
It's messy.
She was not tagged or named, and Rachel didn't even have a throwback selfie with her for someone who played the film's iconic evil queen and literally shared top billing. Gal was nowhere in sight. Suddenly, fans weren't talking about costumes or cinematography. They were dissecting this social media snub. Was it shade? Was it silence? Or was it something deeper? Now, if you thought this was just a forgotten tag, buckle up, because the rabbit hole gets a lot. Messier theories started pouring in, and they weren't exactly subtle. At the top of the list was politics. Turns out Rachel and Gal are not even close to being on the same page when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Gal, being Israeli, has long supported Israel publicly. Meanwhile, Rachel has voiced her support for Palestine, and she didn't whisper it either.
Zegler also faced blowback after posting Free Palestine. Gadot is from Israel and served in the Israeli army.
Free Palestine tweet during filming apparently caused a storm, and it wasn't the kind that just quietly passed by.
We would see people not condemning Hamas, but celebrating, justifying, and cheering on a massacre of Jews.
Rumors swirled that things got tense on set, and that whole "we're just here to work" vibe might have been more about survival than solidarity. But pie isn't the only thing drawing a line between these two. Let's talk about their lives off camera. Gal is 39, a mother of 4, and has been married since 2008. She's all about that family-first energy, glowing in her red carpet gowns.
13, almost 8, 3.5 and 1, just in one.
That's a lot.
So we experience every hormone.
Rachel, on the other hand, is 23, newly stepping into superstardom, still figuring out how to balance award shows with apartment hunting.
When you leave the scene, I turned to the camera and I was like, Gal's mad. It was so, but then you were FaceTiming your kids right after. Yeah. You're like, hey, it's so good.
These women are literally living in 2 different universes, and sometimes that gap can feel like a canyon. You're not going to find them swapping skincare tips in a trailer, at least not without a layer of polite awkwardness hanging in the air. But here's where it gets even juicier. Despite all the buzz and whispers, both actresses showed up together for the film's big Los Angeles premiere on March 15th. 2025, and yes, they posted side by side for the cameras, but the fans saw everything. The smiles were tight, the body language was stiff, and the sparkle in their eyes was definitely not from excitement. It was like watching 2 coworkers at an office party pretending to be besties. For HR, sure, they were professional, but not very warm towards each other. And just like that, every red carpet photo became a clue in the ongoing mystery of, did Rachel and Gal actually hate working together? Then something shifted. Rachel tried to change the conversation. In interviews, she started talking about how women in Hollywood are always pitted against each other, and how important it is to support fellow actresses. Those are some powerful words and a needed message, but she never actually mentioned Gal, so naturally fans started decoding her statement like it was a riddle. Was she throwing shade while pretending not to? Or was she trying to say, move on, there's nothing to see here, while Loki confirming that there was definitely something to see here?
What would you say to those who are just kind of overly critiquing the film at this point? You've worked so hard on it.
Now let's talk about how all of this really affected Disney, and here's a hint: things are not going well for those guys. You'd think they'd be basking in the glow of another billion-dollar box office smash, But nope, they were stuck in damage control mode. With all this drama stealing headlines, the studio reportedly scaled down the premiere. There was no massive press junket and no glittering red carpet extravaganza, just a subtle rollout, almost like they were hoping nobody would ask too many questions. Except everyone did add Rachel gal tension into the mix, and suddenly Disney had a PR crisis bigger than anything they were prepared to handle. But wait, it doesn't end there, because on top of everything else, Disney has also been handling major backlash about their casting choices.
She's attractive, she's got skill, but there are a lot of actresses in Hollywood who bring all that to the table and are not going to absolutely sabotage you.
In June 2021, Disney revealed that Rachel Zegler will be our new Snow White, and at first it sounded great. She's young, wildly talented, her voice is practically born for musicals. Director Mark Webb couldn't stop gushing, calling her vocal abilities just the beginning of her gifts. He said, "She brought strength, intelligence, optimism, basically everything you'd want from a modern-day princess." But while the casting team may have been enchanted, not everyone was cheering.
Every young person dreams about a phone call like that. I've been lucky to have a few of those in my life, but this one is certainly extra special as a huge Disney.
Because here's the thing, Snow White, as the name not so subtly implies, has always been described as having skin as white as snow. It's literally the first thing people point to when talking about the character. So when Rachel, who is of Colombian and Polish descent, landed the role, it raised a lot of eyebrows, comment sections exploded, and everyone from film critics to political commentators had something to say.
Everyone from film critics to political commentators had something to say.
The reason Snow White is called Snow White in this version of the film, because of course she is not white as snow, is because she and her family go through a snowstorm and survived a snowstorm, and so it's a mark of her resilience. That's why she's called Snow.
Some people were thrilled about there finally being a Latina Disney princess, but others, especially on the conservative side, were not having it. Then Ben Shapiro jumped in, all guns blazing, insisting that casting a Latina actress as Snow White was straying too far from the story's original identity. Now, while all this was happening, Rachel didn't hide. She spoke up, and she didn't just defend her casting, she celebrated it. She said she was proud, honored, and even a little stunned that this opportunity came her way. Because when was the last time you saw a Latina actress cast as a character who's historically been portrayed as the palest person in the room?
It's the most emotional experience that a person can go through, to know that what they're working on is something that has reached a generation of people.
The representation hit hard for a lot of people who'd never seen themselves in a Disney fairy tale before, but Rachel didn't stop there. She pushed the conversation forward, reminding everyone that talent, not skin tone, should be the focus. She talked about how Snow White is beloved in Spanish-speaking countries, and how this role was an opportunity not just for her, but for a whole generation of kids who could finally see someone who looked like them in a princess gown. That's powerful stuff. And if you thought the debate stopped there, oh no, it was just getting warmed up, because behind all the applause and outrage was a deeper, more tangled question. What do we do with these classic fairy tales in today's world? Are they untouchable, or can they grow with us? Disney clearly chose the latter. They didn't just cast Rachel, they rewrote the story too. In this version, Snow White isn't named after her complexion.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
She's named after surviving a literal snowstorm as a baby, a near-death experience, instead of a beauty trait. Now that's a twist. Rachel explained that this version of Snow White is all about resilience. The focus isn't on being the fairest of them all anymore. It's about strength, survival, and realizing your worth. One of her quotes pretty much sums it up. One of the core points in our film for any young woman or young person is remembering how strong you actually are, and just like that, a tale that's been told since the 1800s got a 21st century makeover. But not everyone bought into this evolution. Critics said the changes stripped the story of its roots. They felt that the symbol SISM was important and that Disney was bending too far to be woke. Some people saw the casting as a beacon of progress, others saw it as unnecessary tampering, and in the middle of it all was Rachel simply trying to do her job and smile through the firestorm. Meanwhile, film historians and insiders started chiming in with more big picture takes. Leonard Moulton, for one, made a solid point. He said stories have always evolved with society as our world changes. So do our fairy tales. And if diversity helps more people see themselves in those stories, what's the harm in that? Still, this whole situation didn't just expose Hollywood's growing pains, it exposed everyone's tensions. There's a cultural tug-of-war happening right now between honoring tradition and pushing for representation, and Disney, by putting Rachel Zegler in that iconic dress, was clearly choosing aid. But here's the thing, this casting decision might have triggered critics, but it also gave Disney a massive platform to rethink how stories are told. Think about it, how many times have we seen the same pale-faced princess stories over and over? This was a chance to flip the script, and whether you loved it or hated it, it got people talking.